I don't usually sound like this, except apparently when I've got to moderate a conversation with two very distinguished individuals in front of 100 people. But and I wanted to start just by remembering Richard for just 1 minute. And I thought I'd put up this photo of my father and Richard from just around the time my father was diagnosed with glioblastoma. And Richard came to London to spend a few days with him around that time. And I was just thinking, I hope they're together now, looking down at us, remembering them. It's great to be here with both of you. It's so great that you could come. I know we've only got about 20 minutes, and you've got the enviable job of talking about 50 years of friendship. So Auntie Marty, we start with you. Maybe start with how and when you met Dad, and then we'll take it from there.
It was mid-1970. Lincoln and I had arrived with our 10-month-old son, Greg, who's somewhere here now, and we'd come to Dhaka so that Lincoln could work at the Cholera Research Lab and I could be home in South Asia. And one of the first people we met through a magical circle of friends, we met this man named Abed. And so my first impression was of an English, dapper gentleman. And I recall when we started working together on cyclone relief, going to his house in Chittagong, and we listened to Bach and Beethoven. But little did we know that our lives were going to be intertwined, because we met in mid-July 1970, and by November, there was the Bhola cyclone. And a group of us, actually women, started a cyclone relief project for the Bhola cyclone. And so we started collecting relief supplies, and we started working in an island in the bay called Manpura. And we needed a place to store our goods. So we moved into basically Abed's house in Chittagong and took over his garage and found different ways of getting the relief supplies to Manpura. And that began a career of working together. And then, by good fortune, after liberation, Abed went back and with Vikar Chaudhry started what was called the BRAC, Rehabilitation Assistance Committee. And the first task was to float bamboo on rafts into the Howrah area in northern Bangladesh to rehabilitate Hindu refugees who'd fled. And they started that. And Lincoln and I returned to Bangladesh, a newly independent Bangladesh. And it was my amazing good fortune that Abed asked Bahar and me to join BRAC on the same day, and we were his two executive assistants, and he was the executive director. And it was, we worked together for 5 amazing years, and it was the pioneering days of BRAC. Most every work day, I was lucky. I went home with Bahar and Abed to their home on Eschaton Road and would have lunch, delicious lunch, but we would just talk BRAC, 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 BRAC. There was no other conversation to be had. And we called our children the BRAC Brats, and they would accompany us on field trips, and they too were imbibed with BRAC. And he did so, as all of us know, so splendidly that we have these 2 amazing children, and a wonderful son-in-law as well, and this amazing organization, BRAC. There was always, from the beginning, 2 piles of papers, and they never changed height. And I never saw him take anything from them. So I always wondered, was it the same 2 piles of documents? And he didn't have a computer, he didn't have a typewriter, he was just there to talk and listen and to think, right? That was his style. One time up in Shala in the early days, he was lying back. I had taken a deep nap. I was exhausted. I went to whatever small room he was in, and he was lying there. I said, Abed, what are you doing? He said, I'm thinking about all the financial accounts. I have them all in my head. At that point, BRAC was small enough that he really did have them all in his head. The other thing about Abed was that he was quiet. He was a quiet person. I mean, I've seen him mad once or twice, but he was a quiet man and not exuberant, but it was the twinkle in his eye, it was his sly humor and his chuckle that you could hear. And I think that's what our children remember of him as well, as a loving, quiet presence in their lives. He was also quietly stoic. He faced quite a few tragedies in life, but like Tamara so eloquently narrated, he faced them all with a quiet dignity, whatever the hardship was. And so I think he is smiling down on us, both he and Richard. And I think he's there with his dapper look, leaning on a cane. That's how he was when we last saw him. But with a big, broad smile on his face. Because a lot of us, everyone, worried about the transition post-Abed. And as you all know now, BRAC has not only weathered that transition, but under the remarkable leadership of the children and the son-in-law and all the others, I think even expanded on his vision. So I think we have a lot to celebrate as the One BRAC family, but I think Abed would be very pleased with how we've tried to be stewards of his legacy. Thank you.
I can just say to Abed, who's looking down upon us, that Abed, you should be very pleased at what's happened with BRAC after your death. I remember going into your office many years before you passed away saying, do you have a succession plan? And he would smile. He never said a word about succession. He never talked about it. He refused to talk about it. But he did have a succession plan. And Tamara and Shameran and Asif are the plans that he had. So he should be pleased with what's happened in the last 5 years. I remember with BRAC University, he said to me, Lincoln, I'm coming to Boston and I'm thinking of starting a university. And I go, what? So I said, what can I do for you? He said, well, you know, I want the best advice. Well, Bangladesh needs a university, and it's a great idea, but don't start unless you get $100 million, because you need an endowment to do a university well. And Abed listened and nodded his head, and of course, the next day, with zero money, he started BRAC. He was an extremely humble and a shy person. He never liked to be featured and cited publicly. He was a great listener, but also he had a big vision. And I remember sitting with him in his house and talking about how simple it was to make the solution. So he said, let's go and try. So we went into the kitchen, we started taking a pinch of salt and a handful of sugar and mixing it. And I took some of the solutions into the cholera lab and had them analyzed. And I came back and said, told him that the composition was about right. I was not wild. And he said, well, if I can do it, then the mothers in Bangladesh can do it. Why are we standing on ceremony? And the many, many lessons that I learned, I won't go through all of them, but among them were that the people on the ground know how to implement And if you try to put a solution down, you're going to make lots of mistakes. So thank you very much, Marty and Shameran.